Hey everybody, I'm here in Houston with some friends who have all done time and are all doing amazing things with their lives, and I want to introduce everybody. So, Ian, do you want to tell us what you went to prison for and what you're doing now?
Why do I have to start first?
You're the youngest.
I'll start with Morgan.
All right, Morgan, what did you go to prison for? How much time and what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I went to prison for the overdose death of my best friend. I got 5 years for that, which is actually really low. I'm really lucky. But that sort of encompasses what I'm doing now. You can hear, just like in my indictment, the intersection of overdose and the justice system is where I now spend the rest of my life. And I specifically focus on overdose prevention because I don't want any more of my friends to die. So I have a nonprofit called Beats Overdose. We pass out naloxone, fentanyl test strips. Because, back in my day, you kind of had to consent to taking a certain amount of risk with drug use. And now there is non-consensual fentanyl exposure all over the place. So people who aren't even addicted, who do not have a drug problem whatsoever, are at risk of overdose. And so I'm trying to think of like non-traditional ways to get the antidote for overdose into people's hands, teach people how to test their drugs, make sure there's not fentanyl where it shouldn't be, teach people safer use, and just basically how to stay alive. Because people enabled me to stay alive and be here talking to you today.
When we were talking about, we all have a friend named JD who just lost a son to an overdose, and like you said, it's no longer just people that are shooting heroin. You've got kids overdosing because they've got marijuana that's laced. Like,
No,
things are different.
that's not true.
Okay,
There's never fentanyl in marijuana. That's a myth. Kids were taking pills and then they tell their parents that because they don't want to get in trouble for taking pills.
But so it's the pills that are being laced.
Pills. So it's pills. Used to be, back in my day, pills were safe. If you got a 5 milligram or a 10 milligram Percocet, that's what it was. Nobody was overdosing off of a 5 or 10 milligram perk. Now, today, pills are absolutely the highest risk category because they're almost always counterfeit and fentanyl. Like when I was in Mexico last month, a pharmacy offered me, like unsolicited, offered to sell me a 30 milligram oxycodone, and it was fentanyl. They were selling fentanyl to unsuspecting American tourists.
Wow.
And so kids now, they're mostly buying them on Snapchat. Sometimes fentanyl gets into the cocaine, but what happens most often is some drug seller somewhere makes a mistake. They have a bag of cocaine and they have a bag of fentanyl, and they look too similar.
Okay.
And so like what maybe happened to JD's son is he did a line of what he thought was cocaine,
Oh, wow.
but was actually fentanyl.
So it's like straight from Pulp Fiction.
It's exactly what happened in Pulp Fiction, which is now why there's that story about the cartel is starting to dye their fentanyl purple and pink because they saw stories of American drug dealers making that mistake, and the Mexican cartel is intervening and is starting to dye their fentanyl pink.
So it's like the unintended Breaking Bad. It's insane.
It's insane. But we've never seen like the level of risk that we see today where youth, especially youth overdose has skyrocketed, even though less adolescents than ever before in American history are actually experimenting with drugs, but way more are dying because drug experimentation is now incredibly risky because they're buying what looks like a Xanax. They're buying what looks like a Percocet off of Snapchat or from one of their schoolmates. 2 students just died in their high school in Los Angeles in the bathroom. Like, we've never seen anything like this, and kids still don't know. If you buy a 30 milligram oxy off the street and you put that into Google, you say round blue pill M30. Google says, this is a 30 milligram oxycodone. And you think, well, that's safe, and you have just ingested a totally wildly unknown quantity of fentanyl, and you may or may not die.
That's
So
terrifying.
pills, super high risk. Always test your cocaine. Sometimes fentanyl is sold as cocaine. Other times there's, for whatever reason, cross-contamination and there's a little bit of fentanyl in cocaine. There's fentanyl found all across the drug supply, less commonly ketamine, MDMA, meth, but absolutely highest risk is pills. Any pill. There were fake Adderall that had fentanyl in them. Any pill is super dangerous.
Well, that's terrifying. All right, well, after all that, who are you?
I'm Keri, and I'm a reporter. I time, obviously. Hence, we're friends. But I did my time in New York, also for a drug crime, possession in my case. And then I got out and became a reporter who covers prisons, jails, and criminal justice. And right now, I'm the one that dragged us all to Texas.
Yes. You are at where?
Well, as of in 2 weeks, I will be at the LA Times, starting a new job, moving to California, leaving Texas, sadly.
That is amazing. And I just really like to highlight what people can accomplish. The idea that, like, oh, somebody's once a criminal, always a criminal, they're never going to change. Like, saving lives, like, doing national reporting, like, it blows me away. What about you, Marci? Miss Production Deal Lady?
Well, why didn't Keri mention her book?
Oh, yeah.
I have
Where is your book?
It's
Hold on.
here somewhere.
Hold on. Where is it at?
Yeah, this is important. So, we read your book. I started reading it. I can't get my girlfriend to read a book, but we listened so we had to get the audio version for her, and we couldn't stop. Like, we kept driving to hear more. So, yeah.
Banned in Florida.
Corrections and
Is
Aids.
it
So
officially
good.
banned?
It's banned in
Yeah,
Florida.
the Florida prison system banned.
They shot down the appeal?
Yeah, so initially, Okaloosa flagged it for impoundment, which is like it's temporarily banned everywhere until the Literary Review Committee makes a decision. And their reasons for banning it were ridiculous. They said it would teach people how to fake a mental health crisis because one of my friends pretended to, in prison, pretended
Oh
to
my
have...
God, Stacy
Yeah.
Burnett got your book
Stacey-
banned in
yeah,
Florida.
She pretended to have a pet chicken so that she wouldn't go to shoot because she would pretend she was crazy. And it was like a mess of chicken bones that she carried around, or a pet seagull. It was a
Isn't
mess
that
of
like
chicken
Orange
bones.
is the New Black that happened, didn't it?
Oh no, I don't
No,
know.
there was just an
Oh.
invisible chicken.
This
This is a very different.
Completely,
It's
entirely
different.
different, imaginary
I know.
chicken.
Yeah.
No, it's an imaginary chicken. It was a mess of chicken bones that she carried around with her. And actually, it was an imaginary seagull, but there were chicken bones. Is how. But anyways, so it didn't work.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't teach you how to fake a mental health crisis because it didn't fucking work.
Yeah.
She still went to shoe. But yeah, that was one of the reasons they flagged for banning it, and they said that it was inflammatory and like would undermine the like correctional safety or some shit. And so, anyways, the Literary Review Committee met once and upheld that decision, and then there was an appeal. I wrote a letter. The ACLU wrote a letter. Pen America wrote a letter. A few book groups wrote letters, and so did some random people on like Twitter and TikTok, and none of that mattered. It still got permanently banned. And then they said they were going to do another round of appeals, which we didn't ask for. Like that just happened on its own. The Secretary of the Department of Corrections flagged it for another appeal. I don't know how that's going to make a difference onto our third round of appeals. They added another reason to ban it too. They said that it included descriptions of sex, bestiality, or I forget what else. And I was just like, oh my god. Like, yes, there's not any like graphic description of sex.
No,
but, like
not
sex
at all.
occurs. Like there are references to the fact that sex exists.
But they
But
have
like-
those books in
But like the fucking
Yeah,
Bible's
more
allowed.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely way more sex in the Bible. There's more
There's
like,
bestiality in the Bible.
Yeah, there's more sex work in the Bible than there is in my book, but whatever.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's a badge of honor to be banned in Florida,
If you piss Florida off bad enough that they have 3 appeals to ban your book, you've done something.
right?
Yeah, I agree. All right, Marci.
So I'm Marci, and I spent a little over a decade in a Texas prison. I came home. It took me a year to be comfortable with being free and still working on the relationships, rebuilding with my family. And I have a large family, 5 children, and so it took me a year to kind of get with it. And I started posting on social media and telling my story on social media. From that became the production deal, right, with Rosie O'Donnell, and we're working on a show. I'm really excited about that. We were hoping for this spring, but it's looking more like fall. What else? I'm very active in advocacy work. I'm on the steering committee for an advocacy group here in Texas, and we are Justice Impacted Women. It's called Lioness. Let's see, we're testifying in Austin, trying to change some legislation and move some things around in Texas and make it better for society in general, right?
Well, and your situation is unique. You've talked about this some, but you got a significant sentence for a financial crime of which, like, they kind of railroaded you. Like, I don't think that white collar crime is easy and shouldn't be punished and whatever, but you really got a raw deal.
I did. So I committed my crime in a small town in Texas, right? So against some good old boys.
Therein
and
lies the
that's-
problem.
Absolutely, that's exactly what happened. Yeah, my first. So I did have I didn't say why I went to prison, right? And it was definitely a white collar crime. It was theft over $200,000, and I was moving money around, kiting funds from my employer. And
Did you actually steal more than 200,000?
so the charge is 365,000, but Jesse, that's tricky because I was kiting funds, so I'm moving money back and forth. So they pulled every outgoing transaction, but they didn't credit. I actually only touched less than half of that.
That's what I was
So
gonna say.
yeah. I actually should have had a less than or a theft over $100,000 charge, but that's a whole different story, right? They do what benefits them. You know, I'm fairly sure that they have got a lot more on insurance money than
Yeah, I can
was
imagine.
taken. So, but small town, small town politics.
But you're back in a small town, you're raising your kids, you're raising your grandkids, you're there in just an amazing way. You bring this energy to things that people just don't have. Like, people need that in the world.
It's really exciting to be able to manage those relationships with my kids and share them openly, because I think that I was surprised to see how social media kind of shines light on the reality of things. You know, before I went to prison, that wasn't really out there. Everything looked cookie cutter. It looked, and I love now that social media is doing that, and it's giving me an opportunity also. Like you can go on my social media and see me laughing and bubbly and making a pizza from prison, and you can go on there and see me talking about the struggles I'm having with my rebuilding trust with my family, rebuilding trust with my kids, dealing with trauma, mental illness, and I just love that. And all of you guys kind of share that same kind of vibe, and I think it just makes it more comfortable. It makes people, it makes them be able to vocalize and seek help when otherwise they might have just kept their mouth shut and suffered in silence. So
That's amazing. Thank you, Marci. So what about you, Ian, the youngest guy here, afraid to talk in the beginning?
You caught me off guard. No, I thought you were starting now. Out the way. So my name's Ian, and I went to federal prison when I was 21 years old for 3 years. I was like a super ambitious high school kid who started his own businesses, doing like teen concert promoting and making a lot of money doing that. And I wanted to take it to the next level, so I jumped into like raising investor funds from friends and family. And before I knew it, I was way in over my head, lost all the money, lied about it, and before I knew it, like the FBI was investigating me for fraud, money laundering, and making a false statement. And ultimately, I ended up getting charged with 15 federal counts in 2015 when I was 19 years old. And while this is all going on, I go and open up a nightclub called Tuxedo Junction. And so while I'm on trial with the government, I'm running this nightclub, booking like all these crazy acts. And eventually the story ends by I go to prison and I get found guilty on about half of the charges, and I do about 27 months of the 36-month sentence. And when I got out, I started a career with Whole Foods, really like motivated to work my way up in the company and like rise to the top. And I quit that this past August, to launch my company Big Bic Entertainment, or Big Bic Energy Entertainment, BBE Entertainment. And this month we're launching the podcast Locked In with Ian Bick, and we're working on a couple TV series. We're trying to option my story rights and get it turned into something big to kind of like share my story.
When, you and I were talking earlier, and you said something that you were worried about making an impact and essentially righting the wrongs that you've done, because you could file bankruptcy for some of the money that you owe, some of the things you're there. You're saying you're not going to do that. Your role is to make as much money as you can to be able to pay those debts back and kind of give yourself a new start without shorting anybody else.
Yeah, it was never like the plan to lose anyone's money, because these were like my friends, they were my family, and it just got like way too out of hand. And before I could even try to make it right, like the police got involved, the government got involved. and it was just like an overwhelming situation. My goal was to always sell the club so I could pay everyone back, but that obviously didn't happen. So now it's like, okay, sell the life story rights to pay everyone back and get to even.
I mean, that's amazing. It's kind of the idea of restorative justice, except for there were all those months that you weren't in a position to give anybody back anything.
Mm-hmm.
So had you actually been in a position where you could be paying people back then rather than sitting in prison unable to help anybody, it seems like that would do more for the victims or the people that lost something than what happened. But at least you're continuing to try to do it now, which I think is really great.
I think that if I didn't go to prison, though, I probably would have been back into some dumb shit. Only because time heals a lot of things. So I needed to be physically removed from the club in order to stop doing everything I was doing. Because my ways of running the club weren't necessarily ethical. Like going to gamble to pay my bills, like that's just luck. That's not a business practice. I only got lucky doing that. So that wasn't sustainable long term. So it was only a matter of time before, like, you know, I could have gotten severely hurt or whatever could have happened. So it was meant to be, and now here we are.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you, Morgan. Morgan was taking care of a friend who's dealing with
relapse, fentanyl relapse. She was homeless in Philadelphia, injecting fentanyl, which is still the highest risk. One of my best friends in the whole world who came to visit me every weekend in jail for 2 years, and she is on her appointment right now with the Suboxone doctor. She is housed, she is safe, and she is warm.
That's amazing. All right. Thank you guys so much.